Hello and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's, the podcast which, as of today, tees you up for the day ahead in the general election campaign.
My name is Jack Blanchard of Politico. With me, as always, is Sam Coates of Sky News. And yes, you heard the man right. As of today, we are going to be in your ears daily, 5 days a week for the duration of the election campaign. I'm talking to you now on Thursday morning. It is day 8 of the campaign. There are 35 days to go until the general election. And Sam, tell us where you are.
So I am 1,800 miles into this campaign. I've done a lot of travelling, but right now I am back in the study where we always do our podcast in normal times, in peace times, in my wife's study. And it's lovely to have a breather from the road, but I can't wait to get back on.
Given it's not even 7 a.m. when we're going to be recording these conversations, it's going to be hard for us to be in the same room. So, and not least because I'm supposed to be on holiday this week.
How's that going?
Well, I'm here. I can see the sea from my window. I can see a beach in North Wales, which I'm very much not on. And I'm doing an awful lot of Zoom calls and reading about the general election. I'm sort of semi-working and semi-trying to entertain my children at the same time. This is the life we've chosen, Sam. Everyone loves an election campaign, holiday or not.
So every day we're going to start by just picking out 3 things that are going to shape the day. Jack, what are they today?
3 things today. Labour and VAT is going to be a big story today. We appear to have had a change of policy, or at least a clarification of Labour policy on tax. The Tories are very excited about that. The Labour Party are purging the left, or at least that is what the left says. We are seeing left-wing candidates being removed from the Labour selection list and Starmer allies being brought in, so we'll be talking about that as well. And Nigel Farage is around again today. The double dose of Nigel Farage, we'll be talking about him too. Sam, let's start with the tax stuff. You've been following this all week. In fact, dare I say it, you're rather obsessed with it. So brace yourselves, listeners. Sam's got stuff to say. Go on.
Look, over the last 15 years, 20 years doing this job, you learn that what the incoming government, if they are an incoming government, says in an election campaign about tax matters hugely, and every nuance, because it ties their hands and frees them up, is very consequential if and when they get into government. So the position was like this. At the weekend, and certainly in Rachel Reeves' interview with me on Tuesday, the Shadow Chancellor was absolutely specific. While they had no plans to raise taxes other than what they've already said, she took off the table and ruled out any tax rises in income tax, national insurance and corporation tax for the whole of the duration of the Parliament. So other things, presumably, if there were black holes, unexpected events, could rise, even though they didn't want them to, but 3 taxes were taken off the table. She said that to me on Tuesday. Darren Jones, her deputy, the Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury, reiterated that on Wednesday. Last night, so that's Wednesday night, there was a late night statement amending that position. And they added to the list of 3 a 4th, which is VAT. Now, VAT is one of the biggest taxes that we have, but I think part of the reason that they did that is because the Tories challenged them, said Labour would raise VAT, and they have responded by putting VAT in that list. But what you had was, to my mind, the Labour Party altering tax policy partway into an election, possibly because of pressure from the Tories. But I think just there were lots of questions, because we were asking them before the Tories got involved, about this. And binding their hands yet further in a whole policy area that the Labour Party is incredibly nervous about. Remember, the spending plans that they will inherit are incredibly tight, some say unsustainable. The fiscal rules, the borrowing limits that Rachel Reeves has signed up to are the same as the Tories by and large, and incredibly tight. Some Shadow Cabinet members kind of uncomfortable with them and not properly consulted, they tell me. And now they're tying their hands on tax as well. If there are black holes the other side of the election, because oh my gosh, there is more you need to bail out local councils, you need to pay for big compensation schemes. Where's the money going to come from? And they've just ruled out another source of it, VAT, whether it's the scope, whether it's little bits, whether it's... I don't think they were going to raise the headline rate, but you could tweak VAT in lots of smaller ways to raise a bit of cash. All of that suddenly appears completely off the table in a move that I thought was quite surprising.
The Tories are very excited about this, Sam. They've been planning to go very hard on what they wanted to call Labour's VAT bombshell. There were posters being planned. Jeremy Hunt's written an article in The Telegraph today. Jeremy Hunt is also touring the airwaves this morning, planning to hit this message home. And Labour have basically tried to spike his guns, as you say, by ruling out. The Tories are saying that this is Labour buckling at the first sign of pressure on VAT, making up economic policy on the back of a Tory press release, and so on. The thing that strikes me, though, twofold. Labour chancellors don't tend to raise VAT. They don't tend to like raising VAT. They tend to, if they go looking for money, they tend to go for it in taxes which they see as more progressive than one that clobbers absolutely everybody when they go to the shops. And secondly, surely Labour must have seen this coming. They can't have thought that they could sneakily say we're going to not raise all these taxes, but not VAT, and then be really surprised that everyone says, oh, right, so are you going to raise VAT then? So either this is something that they've slightly mismanaged in their communications, or are they really scrambling around panicking that their secret plans have been found out? I find that hard to believe, but nevertheless, the much bigger picture, as you say, is that in a world where Labour are 20 points ahead in the polls and likely to win the election as things stand, where are they going to get the money from that they're clearly going to need? I mean, if you listen to the Institute for Fiscal Studies or any of those think tanks that looks at the public finances in a serious way, they will tell you that whoever wins this general election has a massive, massive public spending problem coming down the track, whether it's Labour or the Tories, and they're going to need some money from somewhere. It's very hard to see where Rachel Reeves is going to get that from.
Any time tax policy changes in a statement after 10 p.m. at night makes me think that they're internal processes of that party aren't working completely smoothly, but we will see how this plays out. Labour will definitely tell us nothing has changed, although, by the way, they've just swapped Yvette Cooper for Darren Jones on the morning round, so that at least has changed.
Darren Jones, of course, is the shadow chief secretary of the Treasury. He was on ITV last night, and he also ruled out any VAT rises at that point. He also claimed he'd actually done the same thing yesterday at his press conference on Wednesday, but I don't think that's true.
I was sitting in the front row, and he used the no plans formulation, which, as we know, plans can change and then you can end up raising that tax, rather than having it in the categorical category. Yesterday afternoon, Darren Jones confirmed there were 3 taxes they wouldn't touch, and now there is a 4th, but they don't want people to talk about this. I think that's the biggest thing. Anyway, now let's move on to another topic connected to Labour, and that's Labour MPs, or people who were Labour MPs until a few hours ago when Parliament dissolved, who suddenly cannot stand. Was thinking about Diane Abbott, but we've got more. Jack, what's going on?
We have got more. I mean, the funny thing about Labour today, Sam, is they're meant to be talking about antisocial behaviour. As you say, this was penciled into their election grid as Antisocial Behaviour Day. They put out a release about how they're going to clamp down on crime or whatever. Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, is meant to be on broadcast and now isn't. This is not a sign of a campaign going well. The other big Labour story is nothing to do with antisocial behaviour. In fact, in Playbook, we're calling it anti-socialist behaviour, because Keir Starmer is not just apparently trying to stop Diane Abbott standing as a Labour MP, although we still haven't got confirmation of how that's going to play out. There are other very left-wing Labour, or until about 2 hours ago, Labour MPs who are also being stopped from standing. Lloyd Russell Moyle has been suspended by the party, and Faiza Shaheen, who stood against Ian Duncan Smith last time and is a very prominent left-wing Labour former think tanker and been a candidate for a long time, has also been stopped from standing in this election. And at the same time, some very close allies of Keir Starmer, a guy called Josh Simons, who runs the Labour Together think tank, a guy called Luke Akehurst, who's a very prominent Labour campaigner on the right of the party, are both being parachuted into plum Labour seats. What we are seeing, Sam, is a reshaping of the parliamentary Labour Party by Keir Starmer and his allies. Now, this is a messy process. It kicks off a lot of anger. The Labour left are furious that some of the few remaining Labour MPs who they actually like are being stopped from standing, and they can see them being replaced with people on the right of the party, as they would see it, and people very close to Keir Starmer. And I think Starmer must have known this is going to cause a row, but he wants this done because when he comes out the other side of the election, he wants a party that's much more aligned with his thinking.
That's exactly what David Cameron did with his A-list in 2009, 2010. Can I just remember you that one such A-lister, one of Cameron's sort of political stormtroopers, was Liz Truss. So be careful if you think you can control these people. It doesn't always work like that. And I know that Labour HQ is desperate to damp down this story. There have been candidates giving interviews saying, what the hell is Labour doing? Receiving kind of phone calls pleading them to stay off the media and even sort of dangling maybe the decision will be reversed by Labour at the high command. I think there was an operation to stop them going public that doesn't seem to have worked. I'm told that the Tory MP blocking bit is now pretty much done, but there's still some work to do on candidates, and there's a few days left until the NEC next week when it all has to be done and dusted. But it is fascinating to see people like Josh Simons of Labour Together, an organisation that frankly I think probably even our listeners don't know a huge amount about. The head of Starmer think tank has now got a seat. Starmer's think tank both generates a huge amount of donations, it collects a lot of money, and it gives quite a lot of money and support to the party. So a huge number of Labour Together employees are seconded into Keir Starmer's team, and they help shape things. And now the guy at the top of that has got a seat, and that's, I think, a sign of the way things are going.
Should say as well, Sam, that the Diane Abbott row is far from over. I mean, this one really has exploded in the election campaign. It was leading the BBC's News at 10 on Wednesday night. That is not what Labour had in the grid, I am sure.
And Sky's News at 10.
And Sky's News at 10 as well. And I do think that much as they might like to be seen to be having a row with the left, I think this one has definitely spiralled out of control. Diane Abbott was at a rally on Wednesday night with her supporters outside Hackney Town Hall, saying she wants to be the MP in Hackney for as long as it is possible. She wants to still be the Labour candidate. They're going to have to drag her out of there kicking and screaming if they want to do it. There's going to be a big NEC meeting next week when all this is going to be finalised. But it's clear that this row is going to rumble on, and it's not just the Labour left who are up in arms about the way Diane Abbott has been treated. We've heard from Jess Phillips, hardly a Labour left-winger, saying that Diane Abbott should be allowed to stand, saying the whole thing has been unedifying. We've seen commentators right across the divide attacking Diane Abbott's treatment. Even the Daily Mail, I see today, is unhappy about the way it's been dealt with. And so you have these two big stories, the selection of Labour candidates, the Labour VAT change sort of blowing up on the Labour Party. And, you know, Keir Starmer's supposed to be, he is campaigning in Wales today, talking about plans for Welsh Labour. Yvette Cooper was supposed to be talking antisocial behaviour. This is just indicative, Sam, of how election campaigns don't always go the way you want them to, and things can start to erupt on you and knock you off grid. And I really think that's happened to Labour today.
Let's talk about Nigel Farage. Jack, what's going on there?
We get a double dose of Nigel today, Sam, which I know you and I will both be excited about. Nigel Farage is doing a press conference, I think alongside Richard Tice in London at lunchtime. They're going to be making what they call a major policy announcement on, you guessed it, migration. But that just feels like a precursor, honestly, to Nigel Farage's return to Question Time tonight. It's been 5 years, more than 5 years, since Nigel Farage was on Question Time. That's obviously one of the country's most watched political shows. And there used to be this thing, didn't they, that it was always Nigel Farage on Question Time. Well, he's stopped doing it, but he's back tonight and he's alongside Piers Morgan. And you can just see that being a real moment of the first week proper of the campaign, because those two do not get on well. Piers Morgan is obviously a very punchy commentator in his own right. In fact, he called Nigel Farage a little weasel last night. So that is something for us all to look forward to as well. And I do think what's interesting about it, Sam, beyond the colour, if I can call it that Nigel Farage brings the campaign, is just that he is so visible in it. I had thought when he ruled himself out of standing in this election that he might just shuffle off and sort of occasionally tweet from afar, but apparently not. This will be the third time we've seen Nigel in public this week, so maybe he's going to be a lot more prominent than we'd maybe expected.
I don't think Nigel Farage, in relation to his role at Reform, given he's not standing, is that exciting. I think the really potentially consequential thing is what happens after the election with him and the Tories. And it was fascinating that he said to the Sun's Harry Cole yesterday, sort of dangled the prospect of some kind of deal. He was saying, what are they going to do back for me, the Tories? Give me something back and we can have a conversation. He was making the point that in a funny way, he'd helped the Tories lots of times through the years, despite also being a kind of nemesis for many of them. And there is a conversation that doesn't start this side of the election. Rishi Sunak basically just ignored him yesterday about whether or not Nigel Farage should be readmitted the other side of an election defeat if that's what happened. And I understand from allies of Boris Johnson that he thinks that might end up being happening, and that the person who is chosen as the Tory leader may have to effectively allow Boris Johnson back in the party if Boris Johnson wants to become an MP again, sort of forgive Liz Truss. And then the third part of what Boris Johnson thinks the next Tory leader will have to do is to admit Nigel Farage into the party. And I suspect Nigel Farage's comments about the Tories will have enraged Richard Tice. Certainly Richard Tice's partner, Isabel Oakeshott, was tweeting, there's only one leader of the Reform Party, and that's Richard Tice. And I think what you can take as a bit of horror from the Reform leadership. But the consequential thing is, it looks to me as if Farage has started to position himself for a post-Tory government world.
And I think just thinking about a post-Tory government world more generally is something that we'll be doing a lot over the next few weeks. There's obviously a sort of parallel universe thing here, one where Rishi Sunak turns it all around and shocks us all and somehow pulls it out of the bag and wins the election. But more likely, according to the polls, is that he's going to lose, and we need to think about what comes after that. And there's a great article, I should probably just plug in The Spectator, by Katie Balls out today, suggesting that the Tories are not really trying to win this election at all. This is about damage limitation, and all the focus that we've seen on pensioners and sort of going after young people is about trying to shore up the base of the Tory party and make sure that they lose with some dignity and with still substantial numbers of MPs left in opposition, rather than the total destruction of sort of worst case scenario. And I think that's a really interesting thing for us maybe to get into on another day, Sam, because we're pretty much out of time today.
We certainly are.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, let me just plug another one. Politico's Power Play podcast is out today. We've got an interview with the US ambassador to London, Jane Hartley, and she says she's already in talks with top Labour figures about their plans for government. So it's not just us thinking about the post-election period.
I probably will hit the road again today, heading north of London to see what's going on. And we will be doing this podcast from wherever we are for the next 5 weeks.
I'm going to go and hit the beach very briefly with my phone on. So have a great day, Sam, and I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.